Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Kulreet Chaudhary's webinar on spring cleaning your body and your mind, brought to you by the Prime Club at theprimeclub.com. I'm Lowell Grumman, Chief Operating Officer of the Prime Club, and I'll be your moderator this evening. Before passing you along to Dr. Chaudhary, I thought I'd give you a little background on her practice and the protocols she's developed to manage chronic neurological disorders by incorporating fundamental changes in diet, behavior, and stress, in addition to the standard approaches to these issues. Her approach has been so successful that many patients now use it not just for neurological issues alone, but also for a wider range of health concerns, including weight loss as well as chronic disease. On completion of medical school, Dr. Chaudhary joined the UCSD Medical Center as a resident in neurology. She is a pioneer in the field of integrative medicine and for 10 years ran the Wellspring Health Clinic at the Scripps Memorial Hospital in La Jolla. Additionally, she's a practitioner of Ayurveda, the ancient Indian science of health. She is absolutely passionate about the need for a paradigm shift in contemporary medicine that focuses on patient empowerment, focusing on health and well-being, and moving away from today's disease-based medical system. Much of her work is brought to life as part of the Prime Club, a 16-week community-based online support program that works through the 4 stages of Dr. Chaudhary's program outlined in The Prime, her book recently published by Random House. The Prime program reduces inflammation, repairs digestion, flushes out toxins to prepare your body for spontaneous weight loss. The Prime Heart Club harnesses the power of community. At the Prime Club, we're empowering you to heal your gut, your brain, and your life in a circle of friendship and support. And yes, you'll shed those unwanted pounds along the way. The Prime Club brings you the latest medical breakthroughs married with ancient Ayurveda, the oldest form of medicine on earth. Join us today at theprimeclub.com. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kulreet Chaudhary, author of The Prime and founder of the Prime Club. Kulreet?
Thank you so much, Lowell. It's such a pleasure to be here with everybody. I know that so many of my patients are on the webinar tonight, and I was just joking around with Jeff. Well, we call him Jeff, also Lowell. We were just joking around about how it would be lovely to have like a group of 500 people just come over for dinner, and I could show you this all in my kitchen. But what I wanted to spend the evening doing today was talking a little bit about the different seasons, and particularly the season spring. There was a reason why we chose spring to be the season to launch the Prime Club, and it's because it's actually the main season in Ayurvedic medicine where your own detoxification systems basically come on board naturally. And so you get the most bang for your buck when you start detoxification programs in spring. And many of you are probably already noticing this. I know I notice this. I notice a little kind of dip in my energy. I get a little bit more irritable. This is also the time when a lot of people get hay fever or their allergies act up. And it's actually all just a part of this natural rhythm in your body to detoxify. And so what I'm going to share with you today are kind of just some very easy, inexpensive, fun ways of taking advantage of this natural detoxification season, natural detoxification time, and just turning basically to your kitchen to help to maximize that. And everything I'm going to teach you here is, it's safe, it's effective, your whole family can do it. And, some people will want to dive into it and maybe do it for an entire month, and other people might want to just take little samples, and that's perfectly fine. I'm literally making you a sampler platter of different ways to detoxify. And these are all things that I grew up with, and I have continued kind of the legacy of using these different vegetables in my family. And even for us, we kind of vamp it up during the springtime, and we'll add more of these into our diet. So let me start with kind of my first one. I feel like the Food Network, because you can't see it, but my entire table right now is just kind of filled with different foods for me to share with you. So the first one is called a krele. This is how we pronounce it in Hindi. It's krele. And I always thought this kind of looked like a vegetable that would be grown like on another planet, because it's a very unusual looking vegetable. And I'll hold it a little closer so you can actually see the texture, but it's got kind of this bumpy, spiny texture. And it's also, it goes by the name of bitter gourd or bitter melon. And many of you may have heard about bitter melon, but may not have known how to cook it or how to use it, or even more importantly, why you would want to do it. Now, the reason that it has the name bitter melon, bitter gourd is because, voila, it's bitter. Now, why is that taste so important for detoxification? There's a couple of things that I'm going to show you today that are predominantly bitter. The reason is one of the main organs involved with your detoxification pathways is the liver. And I talk about this, you know, over and over in my book, but the liver is one of the hardest working organs in your body. And the reason is because we're exposed now to so many different things, including environmental pollutants, as well as pollutants we put in our own mouth in terms of things added to our food, in addition to medications. And so the liver is the main organ that has to pull all of these things out of your bloodstream and essentially make them something that is safe for the body. And so if the liver gets backed up, you start having chemicals that are unprocessed seeping out throughout your body, and that can be the nidus for disease. So bitter tastes in particular are very, very healing to the liver. And that's why we call different foods and different herbs that have the bitter taste as blood purifying herbs or vegetables, because of the effect that they have with helping the liver, which purifies the blood. So this bitter gourd is oftentimes used in the springtime in particular, but throughout the years, to help support liver function. Now, people tend to think about, you know, foods that are medicinal as being untasty, but this, I grew up with this and I actually love this. And for some people, it may be an acquired taste. And I'm going to go through all of the different foods that I have for you and then show you kind of different ways that you can do this. For some, you might want to use this as kind of like, hey, a wonderful alternative to dinner. And other people, you may want to just use it as a little spring tonic. But the bitter melon in particular, of all the things that I'm going to show you, has the most bitter taste. And so it's the one that when you cook, you have to use a little bit of the spices, a little bit more of the spices compared to the other vegetables. So the outside looks like this. The inside looks like this, and you can see kind of the seeds. And sometimes the inside is red because sometimes the seeds are red, just depending on kind of the maturation. And what we typically do in our household is we'll cut them into pieces about this big, round pieces, and then we'll fry them up in different herbs. And so what you can do for the bitter melon is you can either cook it up the way that we cook it up and the way that so many Indian households cook it up. So cut them into little pieces. I would say this is about an inch. And just simply fry it up with some ghee. You can add a few spoons. For this one, I would use a few teaspoons. I would say at the very minimum 2 teaspoons of the prime curry powder. You can add even more. And if you want it to be softer, you can just cover it in a pan. And depending on how well cooked you want it, it'll take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. And you can just simply serve it as a side, you know, to a meal. The other option, which is the option for all of these, is you can actually juice it. And one possibility for the juice is to combine all the things I'm going to talk about, and I'll kind of talk about that at the end. So the second vegetable that I want to introduce you to is the Loki. And I love the Loki. I also grew up eating this. And the Loki is also known as the bottle gourd, and you can see why. It essentially looks like a bottle. And the Loki, unlike the grele or the bitter melon that I just showed you, has an extremely, extremely mild taste. And so if people want to kind of start out gently, you know, and still do something for their bodies to help their body detox during spring, this is the one to go to then. The way that we used to eat this growing up was always on a bed of rice, and we would have some lentil soup and then Loki on the side. And the yellow split mung bean in particular, soup with Loki tastes absolutely fantastic. And you can still cook it in the same way with using the prime curry powder, but you don't need quite as much for the Loki. So the way that you would eat this is you just simply peel it. Let me just show you what it looks like on the inside. I love having all of this food here. And this is what it looks like on the inside, those beautiful seeds. And what you can do is you peel it and then you cut it into kind of just cube sizes like this. And it cooks just the way like a squash would cook. It's not really difficult to cook. They don't take very long to cook. They're very, very, very rich in water. And so as you're cooking it, the water in the vegetable itself will steam out to help the cooking process. And again, you can use this with the prime curry powder. It has a very mild taste, you know, or you can spice it up yourself just the way that you would normally eat other squashes. The taste is extremely similar. Now, the reason why I love Loki so much, in addition to the fact that it just brings up a lot of, you know, childhood memories of my parents' kitchen, is that my grandfather used this to cure hepatitis in his clinic in India. And so what he would have patients do is to actually juice the Loki, and he would have them juice like 2 or 3 Loki a day. And like I said, it's mostly just water, and it has a very, very mild taste. And he would have them do this for extended months in addition to some of the Ayurvedic herbs. And this was one of his treatments for hepatitis, and he was kind of well known in the area for his ability to treat hepatitis using Loki or bottle gourd. So in addition to being able to juice the bitter melon, which honestly you have to take it like it's a shot or something because it is very, very, very bitter, the Loki is extremely mild, and you'll produce quite a bit of juice from one Loki. And so after putting it through the juicer, you could even add, if you want, you know, an apple or something to it, but it's oftentimes unnecessary. And this is such a mild taste that your kids, you'll have an easier time getting your kids to eat Loki or the bottle gourd over the bitter melon if you want to start with this first. And so my third kind of tip for entering into spring and finding a way to kind of enhance the natural detoxification process is using dandelion greens. And, you know, so many of us probably remember seeing these when we were kids. These are the little yellow flowers that grow kind of all over suburbia. And alongside the yellow flower, oftentimes there's the little puff of white, that puffy white ball that we made wishes on. But right next to that are the greens that grow with the flower. And even the flowers are edible. I typically don't eat the flowers, but I have family members that will add them into either salads or cook them. But I love eating the greens. And this is probably one of the easiest things to cook because you basically cook it like you would cook any other green. And you can find this at most grocery stores now. It's becoming quite popular. So in place of, you know, kale or Swiss chard or any other greens, or even in addition to, you can add this in. And this also does have a bit of a bitter taste, but it's kind of close to what arugula tastes like. And even my son will eat these because it's not too strong of a bitter taste. But again, that theme of bitter cleansing the liver is so significant in spring. So of all the times of the year, if you don't typically like the bitter taste, this is the time of year to experiment with it. And for this, you can just simply, you know, fry it up, as I mentioned, just like you would do any other greens, or you could also juice this. So one alternative to doing them individually as meals or individually juicing them is to actually combine all of them together. And that is one of the most kind of powerful spring tonics that you could make at home. And so the combination would be about 1 Loki, and you'll get quite a bit of juice from this. I would do 1 bitter melon in the beginning until you get used to the taste, and if you feel like you can handle it, then go ahead and add a second one, but the taste of a bitter melon can be quite overpowering. And this 1 bunch of dandelion greens, you could easily split this into 2 or 3 servings. So this 1 bunch could easily be split among 2 or 3 servings of the juice. And you could even add this to your existing prime juice for this season because it's such a fantastic addition, or do it in place of the prime juice just for this particular season. And for those who don't want the burden of juicing, I totally get it, but this is the one season that even I will pull out my juicer and get back into the routine of it. But if you don't want to do that, they're so easy to cook, and really other than the bitter melon requiring a little bit extra of the prime curry powder compared to the other vegetables and requiring a little bit more cooking time, they all take about, maybe 15 minutes or less in terms of total preparation and cooking time. So this is a great time of the year to just kind of step back and even just taking a look at what's happening in nature, how everything is literally getting rebirth, and just incorporating some fun and simple ways of introducing some vegetables will help to bring life basically to your life, and particularly back to your hard-working liver that, quite honestly, with our modern society could use all the help it can get. I hope you enjoyed this little introduction to kind of a new array of vegetables. And what we're going to do now is Jeff is going to get back on, and we're going to go through some of the questions that you guys had. You had some wonderful, wonderful questions, and I can't wait to answer them.
Well, you're right, Kulreet. We've got a long list of questions, and I hope we're going to be able to get to most of them, but let me give you one right off the top. A writer writes in, I've experienced extremely vivid dreams during the later stages of the program. How is this related to detox, and what exactly is happening?
So this is very, very common, especially in the later stages. What I have found in working with my patients is that your body will, well, not your body, but you will detox in phases. And oftentimes in the beginning, you'll have more of a physical detox, so your body will detox. And then in the later stages of the program, you'll have more of a mental and emotional detox. And the vivid dream is part of that mental and emotional detoxification process. And literally what's happening is your body is detoxifying while you are sleeping. And this will typically pass, and most of the time people who have a little bit excess pitta inside of them, the heat is coming out in the night, and they'll get vivid dreams or nightmares. And usually it starts out kind of with nightmares and then goes down to vivid dreams, and then eventually you'll sleep through the night again. But if it's really bothering you, there's the fantastic herb sold through MAPI, which is the main company that is offering all of the products with the Prime, called Deep Rest. And typically taking starting with 2 tablets, anywhere up to 4 tablets at night will help with that. Sometimes just doing a glass of warm milk, and preferably if you have raw milk, that's the best. If not, at least get unhomogenized milk, but just some warm milk and add a little, boil it. Not just if it's raw, but you always boil milk in Ayurvedic medicine before consuming it, but just boil it and then add just a little bit of turmeric. As little as a 1/4 teaspoon is enough, and try drinking that if you don't want to do the tablets, or you can even add the 2 together.
Great. Well, Thanks for that. That's good direction. Could you speak to the use of the bone broth? This writer says, I've been a vegetarian for a long time, and it's been the hardest part of the prime for me. I've seen bone broth recommended in programs such as paleo, but I haven't seen it in Ayurveda before.
Yeah, this was by far the hardest thing for me, and as a patient, it was the hardest thing for me. And it was something that I even debated including into the program because I'm so uncomfortable with the way that we have treated animals, in the U.S. And so I want to just first start by saying I so empathize with your concerns, and I so appreciate your concern. In Ayurvedic medicine, we only use animal products, and we only use, meat and bone broth in conditions of significant vata derangement. And basically when there is a tremendous loss of nourishment in the body, so malnourishment. And the funny thing, it's not really funny at all, but just the ironic thing in America is that we get lots of calories, but we're not getting enough nutrients. And so even for my own patients who were looking to lose weight, what I found was that it was so important to give them nutrient-dense foods. And that's exactly what bone broth does. And so it is actually used in traditional Ayurveda therapies. It's oftentimes used when people are going for panchakarma or in states of really severe depletion. And we're just in this unusual situation in the U.S. where we're depleted as a society in terms of our nutrients. And that's why I ultimately decided to incorporate it. And it does specifically help to heal the gut, which was also really important for me to acknowledge its role in that.
Great. Just staying on bone broth for a second. Another writer writes in and says, I've just started stage 2 of the prime. What's the recommended consumption of the bone broth each week?
So this varies quite a bit from body type to body type. And the more vata that you have in your physiology, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you may have a small, build of vata, but it just means the more even vata derangement there is. So if there's a lot of mental activity, if you're having a hard time sleeping, you tend to get constipated or have anxiety, those are all signs that you have more vata, then the more bone broth we recommend. So the average recommendation is, first start with 3 times a week. And I typically recommend dinner time because we want to also move towards having a lighter dinner. So what a great way to do this. Start 3 times a week. If you're noticing that you're having a lot of detox symptoms or you're noticing a lot of fatigue, then go up to 5 times a week. If you're noticing that you're doing great on it, then there's no reason not to increase it further than that. But it really just depends on just how depleted you are and the amount of detoxification symptoms that you have. Now, for me, since I'm traveling more, I actually have started to do it on a routine basis about anywhere, depending on how busy I am, from 1 time to 3 times a week, just as a maintenance. But for detoxification, we typically say somewhere at least 3 to 5 times.
Got it. Thanks. Now, one thing that's common to everyone who does the prime is the tea, and we all start out with tea. So here are a couple questions on tea. I faithfully make the tea each morning, but I wonder if the tea could be giving me headaches.
We've gotten this question a few times. It's not so much that the tea is giving you headaches per se, it's that the tea is triggering you to start detoxifying. And so any aspect of this program that's going to trigger detoxification can give headaches. It just depends on how your body detoxes, and this depends a little bit on body type. For most people who have vata and pitta doshas, they'll oftentimes get headaches when they're detoxifying. So the tea is triggering the detoxification process, and the detoxification process is then triggering the headaches. There's a few solutions to this. First of all, you could always just make the tea more dilute, and so cutting back on the C's by 50% just so that the process is going slower. Or this would be a situation in which we would say drink actually a little bit more bone broth. If you haven't gotten to phase 2 yet, you can just drink more water. But this is where you want to give your body more nutrients, so it can help to flush out the toxins that are being released. Essentially, your body's releasing toxins faster than what you can process. And so this would actually be another great time to include one of these recommendations of, possibly adding in some Loki to your diet, or dandelion greens, or the bitter melon.
Well, staying with tea, how about a way to sweeten that stuff up? A way to sweeten it up in a positive sort of way?
I get this a lot. We typically, in fact, we don't want to be adding extra sugar, but there are some ways to bring kind of the sweet taste to it. And actually adding cardamom will help if you want to kind of sweeten it up a little bit. And I recommend that over adding, sugar or honey to it. Adding a little bit of cinnamon will also do the same thing. And for some people, like for myself, I don't like having the extra sweet taste, but I like it if it's a little bit sour. That will also help to, make it sometimes more palatable. So for some people, they actually prefer having a little bit of lemon added to it. And all of those are perfectly okay.
And tell us again, how much of this should we be drinking every day? Is it possible to have too much? Or should we limit it to 4 or 5 cups per day?
It really depends on how somebody's doing. If they're tolerating it really, really well, they're not having a lot of detoxification symptoms, then there's no problem with drinking more of it. I typically say, because you want to look at how much total fluids you're taking. If you want, you can take, up to 8 cups of it, but just still make sure that you're still drinking water. Water just in and of itself still has its own benefits. So it's not that this should take the place of regular water, but you can easily take up to 8 cups if you're tolerating it and you're not detoxing too much. But the actual ingredients, the amount that you're getting, I cook with about 3 times that amount just in the food that I make on a daily basis. So the actual ingredients are they're food grade, so they're extremely safe.
Now, here's another question that I can relate to. A lot of us travel. How do we manage the tea thing while we're traveling? Is there a commercial version of this available, or is there some other way that you recommend that we can manage keeping on the tea consumption while we're on the road?
No, this is a huge concern for myself as well. And Jeff and I were just recently at a meeting in San Francisco, and he pulled out his prime tea. I was so proud of him. So there's several different ways to do it. One of the reasons that we asked Mappy to help us with the supplements was so that we could have a pre-packaged tea with all of the seeds pre-mixed available for people. And so they do have that available. And what I have done is using the coffee makers, I just heat up the water in the coffee makers and then steep the seeds in that. And then I pack my own little thermos now, and I'll sip the tea through meetings and so forth. And that's essentially how I do it. And I find that it's particularly helpful during travel because, you're oftentimes not eating as well, and the food isn't, quite what you would have done at home. And so the tea is almost like more important when you're traveling. So Mappy has it, or you could just pre-mix it even yourself, and then I keep it just like a little baggie and just scoop it out and then use the hot water from the coffee maker.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks for that. We've got time for a couple more. Here's one. My mother's been diagnosed with complex regional pain syndrome after her knee replacement surgery. She's taking the usual treatment from pain management without much improvement, but can you give us a recommendation for something in Ayurveda for this, or any other recommendation that might help?
Sure. I worked with several patients with this, and not just this, but multiple different pain conditions. And in Ayurvedic medicine, we don't have a, one plan fits all type of approach, but the underlying concept with pain is still consistent with the concept that we discuss in the Prime, which is the underlying inflammation, the toxicity that accumulates. And so the idea is still very much the same, to remove the ama, or to remove the toxic inflammation, and to heal the gut. And so what I would recommend for somebody who has complex regional pain syndrome, they shouldn't go quickly on this program. I would recommend them finding an Ayurvedic practitioner, and the site that I typically send most of our readers and my patients who are looking for somebody now is to NAMA, the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, and they have a referral page. But there are several things that we can do. And I have been just, really shocked by the results we've had with not only, this particular condition, but multiple pain conditions, because quite honestly, in Western medicine, we have almost no answers for them.
All right. Here's one. The Ayurvedic herbs, foods, and detox procedures seem to be contributing to acidity and my GERD. What should I do?
Sure. So what happens when you start to detoxify, and what's happening when you do a program, like the Prime, or really, even just starting to eat healthier, the toxins start to come up. And so that starts to aggravate pre-existing symptoms like GERD here. So the hyperacidity gets a little bit worse. And the general recommendation is to go one of two ways. You can either go faster and accelerate the process, to help get rid of the toxins, or go slower so that the symptoms aren't quite as bad. So it's really not, how do I say this? I don't want you to be discouraged that the symptoms are coming up, because in general you want the toxins out rather than in. And what's happening is you're just accelerating the process. If it's getting uncomfortable, just simply slow down. If it's something that you feel relieved to know, like, oh, well, if that's all it is, then you don't mind, then you can even go a little bit faster, and the overall duration will be slower. Now, for this particular symptom, though, there is a really wonderful natural herb called acid balance that I oftentimes place my patients on who are having the problem. And then as we went along, you're able to slowly taper this off. And if you were already on medication for the GERD, what you'll find is once you complete the program, you'll actually be able to slowly taper off the medication.
Great. Well, we've got time for one more, and it is this. Is it safe to cleanse while under an MD's care? I'm currently taking blood pressure medicine. Is this a good thing for me?
Mm-hmm. So typically what I recommend, because when I was seeing patients, of course, I was, I had both hats on. So I was their physician as well as their Ayurvedic practitioner. And so I could taper off their medications as they went through the program. What I typically recommend, and especially if you're only on one medication, this really shouldn't be much of an issue, is just to let your physician know that you're starting a program. And I can't tell you how many physicians have written to me since we had this book saying how excited they were to work with patients as they were going through it. So I would just let your physician know, bring maybe the copy of the book so that they have an understanding, because it does have quite a bit of science in there, so that they're able to relate to why we are, recommending what we're recommending in the book. And then just have your physician watch the parameters for whatever it is you're being treated for. So for example, if you're being treated for blood pressure, just have them watch your blood pressure, check in like every 6 weeks. And what I found when I was seeing patients is that people's blood pressure oftentimes went down, and so I had to start reducing the amount that they were on. And that's usually the most common thing that physicians have to look out for, is that your overall need for medications go down. So if you were taking blood pressure medication, blood pressure is going down, you may now get lightheaded because now you're on too much medication. So just, get them involved, get them, as part of your overall team, hand them the book and say, look, this is what I'm doing, and I just want you to simply follow my blood pressure. If my blood pressure goes down while I'm doing this, can we reduce your medication? Most physicians, if they know you're doing something that's actually going to help you and it's going to result in you eating better and, not needing as much medication, they're going to at least be supportive enough to watch the parameters that you need so that they can help you make those decisions.
Great. Well, thanks. Do you have a couple words for us in closing? And thank you, Kulreet, for being with us tonight. Any last words of advice for this evening?
Yes, just, I had mentioned this in a newsletter, but with everything new that I'm doing, the one thing that I have missed the most is just being able to interact with patients and being able to give these little tidbits of knowledge of all the things that I've learned over the course of my lifetime. And I am so excited to be, able to have these types of webinars, and we'll do more of these so we can have this type of interaction. That the whole goal of the Prime Club, of this entire project, is essentially to create a community. And I just wanted people to know that you don't have to do any of this alone. That was the entire purpose of creating this, is so that we have a tribe to work together on helping each other out to achieve all of our goals.
Great. Thanks. Now, just as a reminder, a recording of this webinar will be available tomorrow on our website. Go to theprimeclub.com and you'll find it there. Thanks for joining us this evening. We look forward to speaking with you again on another Prime Club webinar with Dr. Kulreet Chaudhary. Good night.